During Operation Crossroads in 1946, a B-29 Superfortress heavy bomber dropped a single weapon on Bikini Atoll in the Pacific. The test, involving over 30 warships and US sailors, showed the awesome, hellish power of the atomic weapon. America's strategic bomber force remains the most awesome military power in the world. The long-range bombers of the US Air Force Strategic Air Command kept the peace for 45 years. The proud motto of SAC airmen was, "Peace is our profession." They kept the peace by wielding the big stick, the threat of massive nuclear retaliation. They flew a range of bombers, each bigger, faster, and even more capable than its predecessor. The first were piston-engine-powered B-29s. These were replaced by the enormous B-36 Peacemaker with 10 engines, 6 piston, and 4 jet. Near supersonic performance came with the B-47 Stratojet, which ushered in the jet era. Its replacement was the 8-jet B-52 Stratofortress, equipped with nuclear missiles. True supersonic performance, a top speed of over Mach 2, came with the B-58 Hustler and the swing-wing FB-111A. But bombers were only part of the story. SAC was also responsible for America's intercontinental ballistic missiles. These ranged from the early Atlas and Thor missiles through the Titan II and the more advanced Minuteman. The latest is the MX Peacemaker, able to strike within meters of multiple targets. 3 bombers currently make up the US Strategic Bomber Force: the veteran B-52 Stratofortress, the supersonic B-1B Lancer, and the B-2 Spirit, the stealth bomber. These bombers were designed with just one mission: to carry America's airborne nuclear deterrent. The concept of strategic bombing was truly developed during World War II. In the European theater, formation raids of up to 1,000 Flying Fortress and Liberator bombers of the US Army Air Corps rained down millions of bombs on the Third Reich. In association with Britain's night bombers, the largest armada of warplanes the world would ever see smashed the Nazi ability to wage war. In the Pacific theater, the island-hopping campaign allowed massive B-29 Superfortress bombers to carry the war to the Japanese mainland. Operating from huge bases at Tinian, Saipan, and Guam in the Marianas Islands, they pulverized Japanese cities by day and night in massive raids. The Superfortress was the most advanced aircraft of World War II. The B-29, the US Army Air Force, finally had a bomber which could carry a sufficient bomb load over a great enough distance to produce significant results. The round trip to Japan from the Marianas was nearly 5,000 kilometers. After crossing the Japanese coastline, B-29 navigators often used Mount Fuji as a waypoint to confirm their position. The air defenses they encountered were fanatical, but the awesome weapons of the Superfortress, 10 machine guns which gave the aircraft its name, shot down many Japanese fighters. Raids of up to 300 superfortresses at a time struck at the Japanese capacity and will to wage war. Key industrial cities hit included Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, Yokohama, and Kawasaki, as well as nearly 60 smaller urban areas. The B-29 struck by day and by night. One particular weapon, the incendiary bomb, caused immense devastation. During one raid alone against Tokyo, the incendiaries dropped by the B-29 set up huge firestorms which completely engulfed the largely wooden Japanese homes and buildings. A quarter of the city was incinerated, and over 120,000 inhabitants were either killed or injured. Meanwhile, aerial mines reduced shipping to a trickle and virtually cut off all supplies to Japan. But America had a secret weapon which would end the war at a stroke. On the 6th of August 1945, the B-29, nicknamed Enola Gay, dropped the world's first atomic bomb on the coastal Japanese city of Hiroshima. The little boy weapon, which had the equivalent explosive power of 20,000 tons of high explosive, blew the city out of existence. As many as 130,000 people are estimated to have perished in the ensuing fireball, and many more would die later of radiation-related illnesses. Japan reeled at the shock, but refused to yield. A second weapon, the Fat Man, was dropped 3 days later by a B-29 Boxcar, causing a second distinctive mushroom cloud to appear over Nagasaki. Japan surrendered unconditionally 5 days after, and World War II was over. But the atomic bomb had utterly changed the world. Far-sighted politicians and military men recognized the fact that the balance of power in the world was now held by those who had the A-bomb, and they planned accordingly. One of America's first steps was to set up a long-range bomber force. On the 31st of March 1946, the Strategic Air Command was born. Its primary aim, deterrence of aggression by the threat of massive nuclear retaliation. And the main enemy was now communism, inspired by the Soviet Union and her allies. Relations between East and West deteriorated so much that the wartime alliance quickly broke down and evolved into a hostility which became known as the Cold War. It's doubtful if any bomber in history was more impressive than the thundering Convair B-36 Peacemaker. Everything about it was big. With a takeoff weight of 185 tons, the B-36 was larger than any other bomber that had ever flown. It remains the world's largest operational warplane. The wingspan, at just over 70 meters, was greater than the distance flown by the Wright brothers during man's first powered flight in 1903. Power was provided by 6 massive piston engines buried in the wings and facing rearwards. Later, B-36s boosted this power with twin-podded jet engines under each wing, so that there were 10 engines, 6 turning and 4 burning. The B-26 needed every bit of power available to get airborne. The B-36's 50-meter fuselage earned it the nickname the Big Stick. It was so long that there was a communications tunnel linking the fore and aft crew compartments. The latter housed the stations of the rear and side gunners. The B-36 had such a long endurance that rest bunks were provided here for a relief crew. For self-defense, the B-36 bristled with 20mm cannon. It carried 16 of them, paired in 8 remote-controlled gun turrets. 4 weapons bays could carry a total bomb load of 20 tons. The normal bomb load was much smaller, around 4 tons, or 1 large nuclear weapon of similar weight. The first Peacemakers entered service with SAC bomber wings in 1948, and they were joined by nearly 400 more. In due course, they equipped 11 SAC bomber or strategic reconnaissance wings until 1959. B-36s dropped America's first hydrogen bomb, a weapon of even greater destructive power than the atomic weapon. It was with B-36s that SAC refined the system of airborne alerts. During any 24-hour period, SAC always had several nuclear bombers airborne, ready to launch at short notice in case of surprise attacks. The bombers constantly practiced simulated long-range attacks against American cities. But the reconnaissance versions carried out their snooping missions for real, flying close to and reportedly over the Soviet Union in ultra-long missions lasting over 40 hours. Just as its B-29 predecessor had done 7 years previously, the B-47 Stratojet introduced another quantum leap in bomber aviation. First flying in December 1947, the Stratojet was the world's first swept-wing jet bomber. It had outstanding performance, combining the range and payload of a bomber with jet fighter speed. The B-47 began to equip SAC bomber units in 1951 and would form the backbone of the service well into the mid-1960s. But even as the B-47 was entering operational service, Boeing had already planned on its drawing boards a truly heavy bomber. The massive 8-jet B-52 Stratofortress had been America's most important post-war bomber. Entering service in 1956, it gave SAC a bomber with a truly effective global reach. First and foremost, a strategic bomber, the B-52's main weapons during the 1950s consisted of free-fall thermonuclear bombs. This is the Mark 15 weapon, nicknamed Zombie. In May 1956, this bomb was dropped in Operation Red Wing on the Pacific island at Bikini Atoll. Similar, but even bigger, was the monster Mark 17, which had a 25 megaton warhead, equivalent to over 1,000 times more power than the little boy weapon dropped on Hiroshima. By the early 1960s, the increased Soviet air defense threat led to the introduction of standoff weapons to supplement free-fall bombs. From 1961 to 1976, the B-52 carried the GAM-77 Hound Dog missile. Powered by a single turbojet, it could deliver a 1 megaton warhead over 800 kilometers from launch. The GAM-87A Skybolt was a joint US-British weapon of the late 1950s. Intended to be dropped by SAC's B-52s and RAF V-bombers, Skybolt was an air-launched ballistic missile. It was tested but never entered service as the project was later cancelled. To confuse enemy radars, B-52s also carried the GAM-72 Quail decoy missile. When SAC bombers went to war once more, it was not to drop nuclear weapons in anger against the Soviet Union, but to conduct a conventional bombing campaign in Southeast Asia. Operating from bases in Thailand and Guam in the Pacific, SAC B-52s pounded Viet Cong and North Vietnamese targets relentlessly in arc light and Linebacker raids. from 1965 to 1972, they dropped millions of tons of bombs on the steaming jungles of Vietnam. By the time the B-52 had completely replaced the Stratojet as the main SAC bomber, another aircraft had brought the service into the supersonic age. The design and development of the world's first operational supersonic strategic bomber was one of the greatest challenges in aviation history. The B-58 Hustler's sophisticated design took huge risks. Under the very thin delta wing hung 4 pods housing the newly developed J-79 jet engine. The Hustler had no bomb bay. Instead, nuclear weapons and fuel were carried in giant pods under the fuselage. The prototype first flew in November 1956, and from the start of the service in 1960, the bomber was a winner. Hustlers were very noisy, very complex, and very demanding to fly, but they offered fantastic performance, with a top speed of over Mach 2, to demonstrate the bomber's impressive capabilities to the world, including no doubt the watching Soviet Union. The first SAC wing set more than 19 world records for speed, altitude, and carrying payload to altitude. Supersonic flights were made in the USA, as well as between the US and London, Paris, and Tokyo. The London-Tokyo flight in October 1963 was made at an average speed of 1,500 kilometers per hour, but the Hustler's complexity made it extremely expensive to buy and to operate. Just 116 examples of this fantastic machine were built, and in 1970, the 2 wings were disbanded. While efforts were made and failed to replace the vulnerable B-52, it continued to serve SAC faithfully, albeit with new attack, navigation, and defensive systems and weapons. An electro-optical TV sensor and FLIR are mounted in 2 bulges under the cockpit. Together with a terrain-following radar, the system allows the B-52 to fly and navigate at low level, 150 meters and below, at night and in adverse weather. The B-52 was now designed to attack fully zipped up, flying low level and entirely on instruments. Although free-fall bombs are carried, standoff weapons have assumed a greater importance. Used primarily by FB-111s, the Boeing AGM-69 SRAM short-range attack missile can also be carried by the B-52 to suppress enemy defenses at ranges of up to 200 kilometers. The main standoff precision attack weapon is the Boeing AGM-86B ALCM, air-launched cruise missile. 6 can be carried under each wing, plus a further 8 internally on a rotary launcher. The missile is basically a small unmanned aircraft, with wings which flick out after launch. Powered by a small turbojet engine, it navigates at low level for up to 2,500 kilometers by means of inertial guidance, updated by a terrain contour matching system, a version where the conventional instead of nuclear warhead was used in Desert Storm. SAC operations with the B-52 saw an expansion of its capabilities and missions. Until the mid-1990s, the B-52G and H had 3 main roles: standoff nuclear attack, conventional power projection, and maritime operations. In the conventional bombing role, they carried over 40 kinds of free-fall bombs, mines, and torpedoes, as well as Harpoon anti-ship and conventional cruise missiles. However, the diminished threat resulting from the breakup of the USSR led to a reappraisal of the roles of all US strategic bombers. By 1995, all G-model B-52s had been retired, leaving the H as the sole operational version. Under the new SIOP, Single Integrated Operational Plan, for American war fighting and targeting plans, the 94 surviving B-52Hs will form the main airborne nuclear deterrent. Efforts to replace the B-52 began in the mid-1960s. These had taken shape in the form of the Rockwell B-1, which was to have a long and troubled development. The swing-wing B-1A, which first flew in 1974, was designed as a high-altitude nuclear attacker capable of Mach 2. But that would have been suicide in the face of modern missile defenses. Instead, it would penetrate Soviet defenses at high speed and ultra-low level, jamming radars with its sophisticated countermeasures and defensive systems. But the high cost of the program led to its cancellation in 1977 by US President Carter, who ordered only limited development work to be continued with the 4 prototypes. During further tests, the B-1A would demonstrate that it was a truly awesome machine. It combined the speed and terrain-following capability of the FB-111A, coupled with the load-carrying ability and range performance similar to the B-52. Eventually, the program was reinstated by President Reagan, and the revised B-1B was rolled out in 1984. Simplified intakes were one of the many changes. The mission was now low-altitude penetration, and the new bomber also had many stealth features. In service from 1986, 100 B-1Bs became SAC's primary nuclear bombers. The 3 internal bomb bays and external racks can theoretically take up to a staggering 60 tons of weapons. These range from ordinary and advanced cruise missiles and SRAM to B-28, B-61 and B-83 freefall nuclear bombs. The fall of the Soviet Union has seen the B-1's mission undergo a thorough re-evaluation. Originally a strategic weapon, the 94 surviving B-1Bs now form the US Air Force main long-range conventional bombers. Looking like no other flying machine ever built, the B-2 stealth bomber is an extremely bold attempt to produce a strategic bomber able to avoid enemy defenses by being all but invisible to radar. Details of the secret design were finally shown at the rollout in 1989. The internal structure and the curvaceous flying wing shape dissipate, deflect or trap radar energy rather than to reflect it back to hostile radars. Northrop first proposed flying wing bombers for SAC after World War II in the form of the unsuccessful XB-35 and the XB-49 designs. Over 40 years later, the advent of supercomputers finally made these a practical reality. Designed largely by computer, the B-2 uses a high proportion of composite materials in its construction. However, this cutting-edge technology is also extremely expensive. At over $1 billion apiece, the B-2 is the world's most expensive combat aircraft ever. Original plans called for 132 bombers, but these have been drastically cut to just 20 aircraft. By mid-1996, 9 were in service. Their ability to attack undetected makes them the US Air Force's silver bullets, to be used only against the highest priority targets. US strategic bombers have formed the single most powerful military force the world has ever seen. Flying bombers, which have become progressively faster, more complex, more capable, and more expensive, they have arguably kept the peace for over 4 decades by deterring aggression with the threat of massive nuclear retaliation. Today, the reduction in global tension between the 2 superpowers has seen a change in that strategic role. The US bomber forces are geared towards greater flexibility and fly a wide range of conventional missions. However, their principal task remains power projection, the ability to strike at targets far away with massive conventional or nuclear weapons. For this mission, they have no equal in the world.